Hello, witches. Did you hear we're hosting a magical marketplace? Join us on Saturday, October 18th at the beautiful Sunshine Prophecy in Oakland, California for a day of celebrating our witchcraft. We'll have vendors selling their magical wares, we will have practitioners offering their services, and we will have space for the community to enjoy each other. After the marketplace, I, Casey Zabala, will be hosting a tarot workshop on the cards of 2025 and 2026, the Hermit and the Wheel of Fortune. So join us on October 18th, just before the Samhain portal, for a day of celebration, a day of magical connection, and space to celebrate this beautiful community. See you there. Find the link to RSVP to this free event in our show notes. Dear witches, staying up to date with the moon? Seeking a little reminders to re-enchant your world? Subscribe to the Modern Witches newsletter for lunar love notes and magical inspirations delivered right to your inbox. Modern Witches is shape-shifting, yet it will always be a project that centers our mystical community members. Do you have a course or a podcast you'd like to promote to magical babes? Want to share your art with the folks who might be most touched by its spiritual themes? Send us an email at info@witchesconfluence.org to have your work promoted on our newsletter. Subscribe to Modern Witches newsletter in the link in show notes. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Modern Witches podcast. I'm Casey Zabala, and I'm delighted to be here with Hannah Levy today, a friend and collaborator. And I was just kind of reflecting on how Hannah and I met together. And yeah, I think it's really a testament to the work of being a creative, witchy, spiritual person in this world who wants to build community. And I think that's something Hannah and I have been doing recently that we're excited to share about. But Hannah, I would love if you could just introduce your work for our listeners and
Yeah,
we can dive into a conversation about tarot and the devil.
sounds great. Hi, thank you. Thank you, Casey, so much for having me on here. It is an honor and a privilege because I've been such a huge fan of the Modern Witches podcast and the community for so long. So I am a writer and editor, and I'm the editor in chief of the Rebis, which is a annual print only tarot themed literary anthology where for every year we do a deep dive into a single tarot archetype, and we're currently in our fourth year of production, which is very wild to me. And this year we have been covering the devil. And so the magazine just came out. It is available to order on the rebus.com. And the Rebus is also all 100% not for profit. So this is a passion project for me and a community building project and part of like a spiritual creative offering. And sales profits go back into our operating costs so that we can pay all of our writers and our artists. And then they get redistributed back beyond that to three different social justice orgs: the National Network of Abortion Funds, the Segurate Land Trust, which is an Indigenous women led land trust here in the Bay Area in Northern California, and Liberated Capital, which moves resources to BIPOC communities. So that's a little bit about me.
Lovely. It's really truly amazing what you've been doing with the Rebus. I feel like it seems like you had a really strong vision. And I'm curious, how this came to be. Like, what was the seed that was planted for you with the Rebus, a tarot
Yeah.
magazine?
Yeah, so I this the seed was planted in 2021, very early 2022. I was coming off of a sabbatical for my job working in tech startups and doing corporate marketing. I had been in that space for over 15 years, like deep burnout
Mm.
and pandemic burnout, feeling lonely, feeling disconnected. really turning to tarot and spirituality as a daily practice to ground myself. And I went through a sort of a very like manic time where I just really like did a deep submersion into tarot study, and I started following every single tarot practitioner. I probably bought like 20 tarot books and bought a bunch of decks and was really just trying to figure out like how can I unlock the secrets of the tarot to help me. And it was a combination of like self help, self-awareness, like my own like therapeutic practice, complementing like the therapy that I was in with a therapist, but also it was part of my creative practice because coming out of that corporate burnout, I was really trying to um, get in touch with my own writing practice, outside of like brand marketing writing and all of the corporate writing that I had done. So I started writing poetry based on the tarot archetypes as a way to like prompt my own practice, like just getting back into the habit of writing. And I was struck by this idea that there were so many incredible tarot practitioners and writers and artists and people who were using tarot to make art, and also teaching tarot and thinking about tarot in so many different expansive ways, everything from psychology to mythology to fiction writing. And I had this vision of like bringing people together, and because of my background in writing, I thought of creating a publication, and it had always been my dream to like write a physical book or do a physical magazine. All of my professional background had been in online marketing, so writing for the web. And I felt like this idea for a publication, like this kind of combination of a literary magazine and like an art book, really something like special, like a keepsake, um, felt like an antidote to the doom scroll that was happening around me and like the dumpster fire of the world that we were living in at the time and the world we're still living in. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was kind of this idea. And I had the idea when I was driving one day. I was driving and I kind of just like was in driving at night, and I had this idea of like, what if I could invite all of these amazing people that are creating so much art and beauty and like bring them together thematically? And the idea of doing one single tarot card really for me was about the the idea of slowing down and immersing myself in the how expansive and the like complete multidimensionality of a single card and how far you could take a single card. So we started with the Wheel of Fortune, because I was driving and I was thinking about surrender and control, and I was holding a wheel, and I was like, we're not going to start with the Fool. We're going to start like in the middle of the major arcana because yeah, that's just how life was working for me at the time. And so then from there, we went to the Chariot and then the Star and then the Devil. And the flow for those publications and like figuring out what the theme is really has come organically. Every time I've tried to force, like, what is the next card going to be? I feel blocked and can't think about it. And eventually I have to just trust that the right card is going to emerge. And that's what's happened every year.
Hmm. I love that so much. I love this idea of starting in the middle too, because I think the fool for me, as someone who studied the tarot for a long time, like it's part of the major arcana, but it's also not
Hmm.
to me. Like the fool is everyone who approaches the deck, like bringing whatever karmic baggage you have with you to the moment of the divination. And so that's why you can start anywhere in the tarot and be at the beginning of your journey. So I really love that. Yeah, and I'd love if you could tell the story of how you decided on the devil for this issue because I think it's a cool one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I was coming off of the publication of The Star last fall, and The Star was really about approaching the concept of radical hope in a time when hope felt really far away. And I thought about a lot of cards for 2024. I was thinking about the Justice card. I was thinking about the Death card. There was just a lot of heaviness that I was I was considering, and nothing felt right. And when I thought about the star, I felt this like yummy, like sparkly feeling, but I also felt afraid because I was like, how do we have the star right now? Like, do we
Mhm.
deserve the star? Like, is this something that we can actually hold on to? And then I started researching the star and reading all of my reference materials about the star, and I was like, yeah, this is the right card to do. And so after, we had come out of the publication of that, after that had finished, I was actually at the witches conference that you hosted in November. And I was talking to a lot of people there, and a lot of people were like, this is so great. And they were like flipping through the star, and they're like, what's next? What's next? So everyone's question is, once you finish one thing, people are
I know.
eager. And I love the excitement, but I'm like, can we just sit with the fact that we did this
This,
one?
yeah.
So of course I was kind of like, I'm like, it kind of prompted me to reflect a little bit. And I was really holding the energy of the star and thinking about the star. And I had this visualization, like I had a truly like an image of the star, like a North Star shining in the sky. And then I had this vision of it like falling to Earth, like a shooting star falling. And it immediately reminded me of the story of Lucifer, the idea of a fallen angel. And of course, Lucifer's name means like light bringer. And I was like, that's it. We're doing the devil. Like it made sense. And then Donald Trump was elected
Mhm.
president again, and things descended and descended. And I was like, yeah, we're gonna go into the underworld. Let's talk about power and oppression, and let's talk about pleasure, and let's talk about taboo, and let's talk about like systems of violence.
Mm.
So it felt really right, and it was like a somatic feeling of rightness in my body. And then as I started telling people, everyone got excited, and so I knew that was the right. It ended up being the right call.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you got to trust your visions, number one.
Yeah.
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 Um, but absolutely, I do feel like, you know, just like the work that you do in terms of compiling all these various different contemporary artists and writers, I love so much because I remember as a kid, like going into used bookstores and looking for witchy stuff. It's like my favorite thing to do. And there are all these amazing anthologies like First Wave Feminism, which has its own issues, but like they were doing a lot of like collective publication work that really showed where the thinking was at the time in like magical spaces, spiritual spaces. And they're such like beautiful little time capsules. And so I appreciate that, you're
Mhm.
tuning in with the archetypes, bringing these people together and creating something for us to like really sit with during these times where, yeah, the devil is among us. Um, yeah, I'm curious like what you were most surprised by as you were editing this anthology or collection.
I think going into it, I had this feeling, kind of like it made sense to me to hold on to this idea that like this may be a very like trauma filled
Mm,
publication.
mhm,
And I was approaching people's submissions and their proposals with the kind of care that I thought that that might be required. Like I was anticipating just a lot of heaviness. And I talked to our guest editor, Meg Jones Wall, who I had invited to be the guest editor of this issue because they're writing a book on the double archetype, and so have been really deep into research about that. And we talked about like, okay, how do we want to navigate you know stories about trauma and addiction and um, potentially sexual violence, and like these themes are really delicate. And I was really surprised by how beautiful the submissions were, even when they dealt with themes of trauma and with, um, sexual assault or just like, yeah, memory and loss and addiction and just the shame, these big, heavy things like shame. So it felt really like how to, it felt like alchemical, this idea of transforming pain into something that could be consumed in a way that made space in our bodies to like accept these stories and accept the art. And I was surprised by the fact that I think reading through all of the contributions, like, yes, there is the devil is there, right? There is a little bit of that heaviness, but that it feels a lot more expansive. And um I think that was the yeah, I think that was the big takeaway for me. I was kind of like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to put like trigger warnings on every single thing that we do,
Mm-hmm.
or like a, and we do have, a content warning at the on the table of contents, just for people who are flipping through it and kind of like, is this going to be for me? Because I
Mm-hmm.
understand that that's important to recognize. I think anyone who's opting into a publication about the devil is likely going to make some assumptions about the content inside, but you have to be clear on
Right.
it. But yeah, I was just surprised by how really beautiful the archetype ended up being, because when
Mm.
I used to get the devil card in a reading, it was maybe quite not as panic inducing as the tower, but it was definitely a card of like confrontation and discomfort. And now I think that that has shifted for me into there's a more playful energy and there's a little bit more ease
Mm.
than there used to be. And I think that's really been with, I mean, I started working on this in January and now we're into the fall. So sitting in the archetype for this long has, I think, created a lot of space for me with it and having compassion for the devil.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. And I think you were speaking to this earlier, but how multidimensional tarot archetypes are.
Yeah.
And you really see that when you're able to like open them up in these creative ways. Um, and the devil has always been very alchemical for me as an archetype. I think, if you think of some of like the traditional symbols, like the Baphomet connection,
Mhm.
was like this androgynous, like demon energy. Um, that's very much about like holding opposites, like holding space for what comes through with pain and trauma, like what
Yeah.
can come with that. Um, it's such a it's a definitely a challenging archetype. It's my hidden factor card in my personality
Mm.
archetypes with the tarot. Um, and it's something that I think used to elicit some fear, especially because I was raised in like a Catholic environment. Um, but now I see as it's a real creative archetype to me. Um,
Totally. And I think for me, I know there's, if you think about the devil in terms of like systemic oppression, right? It's going to be very different than the context of thinking about the devil inside of you, like the
mhm,
the fears that you hold. When I think about the devil on an interpersonal basis and like my own relationships to myself and to others, now I feel like I'm being invited to approach fear with curiosity, and like that fear is actually, yeah, like you said, like it is a energy not to move away from or to resist, but to get super curious about, which I think, is different than thinking about the devil on a societal level or on a systemic level, in which case I think the devil invites, rebellion, or the devil invites ways to bring pleasure and joy into moments in which, there's like so much abuse happening. And so I think it's there about like reclaiming power or fighting back and resisting and speaking out and naming what's going on. And then on an internal basis, for me at least, it's been about like not just trying to repress fear, not just trying to repress shame, but really allowing it to emerge, and then um, dealing with all of the uncomfortable emotions and sensations with it as a way to approach it with, yeah, with like curiosity, like, okay,
mhm,
like, so so like, this is what I'm thinking, like, let's work with this instead.
totally. And I think like very much on the surface of this archetype, it's such an invitation to just look like see the shadow material,
Hmm.
whether it's inside yourself or in our society at large. there's a way that it's really asking you to confront that and just that's the task, you know?
Yeah. And
Um,
it's so like when I started approaching shadow work, I was like, okay, it's like journaling and like we do some ritual and like I'm in therapy, so like shadow self came up. And it's so like you can say you're doing shadow work, but then like actually feeling into shadow work is so murky. It is so like the visceral and like almost like nauseating for me on a
mhm,
personal level. It is lots of crying. It is lots of uncertainty. It is lots of like questioning and self-doubt. It is like dark night of the soul energy. And like that is much easier to talk about than to actually like do. And then I think about like how do we even have the capacity to be doing shadow work when we are like working under capitalism and when we are like when like human rights abuses are happening and genocide is happening and climate collapse is happening and like all these things, right? And then we're like, oh yeah, well you got to go do some shadow work. Like, so I just want to acknowledge that like sometimes I don't even know if it's possible to set an intention to like work with the devil. Sometimes it just like grips you and then you're
totally.
thrust into the deep end. And if you can take a breath and look around and be like, oh, okay, like I got sucked into the underworld. Maybe someone, maybe you're forced there. And then it's like, how do you like see how you are tied and bonded to it? And then what is the next step from there? But
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard to talk about working with the devil hypothetically. It's like,
Mm,
that's been one thing that's come up with the magazine is like, when I was working with the stories, like asking people to be like, can we go deeper? Can you get a little bit more vulnerable? Can we be a little bit more specific about how did this feel and how did this manifest for you? Because talking about it at a high level, I think is one thing, and like actually unpacking the day-to-day experience of being in like a devil theme of your
mhm,
life or like in a devil cycle is
yeah.
it's more volatile and chaotic.
Mhm, messy.
So messy.
Yeah.
And like, like I'm a recovering perfectionist and like messiness is I'm ashamed of messy. So I've had to get really comfortable with that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very real. I think it's, whenever I'm working with clients and there's the devil involved, it's a prompt for me and my intuition usually guides me in this, but it's like there's either addiction, abuses of power happening, like toxic relationships. There's always like some way that the devil is showing up, right? It's it's rarely a high level abstract concept. It's like, no, there's actually something that is really real, really messy, really uncomfortable, and difficult to be with, difficult to reverse engineer a little bit. Um, and I think it's interesting. Like, I think that shadow work is such a privilege. And I also think that, like, the shadow work that we have to do, participate in with the collective right now, as we see people's shadows just like creating turmoil for other
Mhm.
people everywhere we look. It's like, I don't think we can separate the collective shadow work and our own shadow work. For me, they're so connected,
Yeah,
you
it's true.
know?
Especially for me as like a white woman, like a white
Yeah.
cisgender woman living, like I think that the burden is on me, on us
Yeah,
to consider that. Yeah, I did a lot of
absolutely.
like especially reckoning. I'm Jewish, and so reckoning with my own Zionist upbringing and like unlearning Zionism
Hmm.
and figuring out my relationship to Israel and Palestine. That was like that is a good example for of the
Yeah.
like shadow work for me and um how I internalized so much like settler colonialism and so much propaganda. And then now how I have been approaching like the genocide and how do I show up and how do I speak out? And yeah, it's constant work. It's not, and I think the devil is something where it's like, it's not just a one time thing. It's like any addict. in recovery will tell you like they are still an addict for life. Like
Hmm.
it's a constant thing too to be working with and practicing.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much healing potential in this archetype for me.
Yes.
Um, and so important right now, so applicable at this moment.
Yeah. Well, like the relationship between the lovers comes up a lot in the Rebus,
Hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah,
and the lovers is such healing energy. The lovers is intimacy. The lovers is finding yourself and like caregiving back to yourself and filling your own cup. The lovers is harmony, right? And balance. And so, yeah, I think the devil exists on that axis. And I think
mhm,
activating the devil has, you have to kind of activate the lovers to counteract that.
totally. Yeah, I think it's very real. Ooh, maybe the lovers. Now I'm doing that thing you were annoyed by. What's next? No,
No, I
I'm
know.
not gonna ask.
That's okay.
We're gonna sit with the
We're
devil
sitting
for
with the
now.
devil. The devil
Yeah.
still wants to be here. He doesn't want to leave us yet.
No, we're not ready. We're actually really not ready. We still gotta do more shadow work. Guess what?
I just need to get through Scorpio season.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I mean, I'd love to ask you about your own creative practices with the tarot because it
Yeah,
seems like
sure.
this kind of naturally was part of this work, but you said you write poems with the cards. Is there any type of practice you could share with our
Yeah, well,
listeners?
when I first got started, it was truly just pulling a single card and writing, free writing, like using it almost like a writing prompt. So looking at the symbols and the colors and the images. I started with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but I expanded to other decks as well. And actually got into a practice of I'd pull a card from like whatever deck I was, working with at the time, and then I'd go and I'd pull a bunch of other decks that I had and find that card in that deck and spread out all of the different versions. And then I would kind of consider like, okay, what wants to emerge here? Like the poems that want to emerge. And so that was my first like entry into using tarot as just like writing prompts. And I enjoyed that more than I don't know, like doing spreads for myself and asking queries and then like journaling or whatever. Although that I still use tarot in that way a lot too. And then I went through a really like I was in a very generative phase of writing, and then it kind of exited my body, and I kind of went into like a little bit of a writing block where I couldn't tap into that energy. And I used tarot to prompt and unlock during those blocks. Just, yeah, inviting in the lessons for each card. And I would do the thing where I'd like pull cards and then I'd look up in all my reference books, like who's written about this card, and I'd read what they did and I'd underline and I'd pull words and kind of do like, bibliomancy where I'd pull words and phrases from what people have written about and I would kind of incorporate that into my writing. But a lot of times, like I'll take a deck with me when I go out hiking, and I do a lot of drafting in my head and in my notes app when I'm on walks and hikes. Like that is just a way for me to be in like a really open space for creative work. And so I'll bring a deck with me and every so often I'll like pull a card or I'll sit down and pull a card and then I can kind of like write that out in my notes app or figure out do I want to incorporate that into a piece of writing. So a great example is I'm writing an essay right now for a London-based literary journal called Black Flowers about this abandoned military base in Northern California and how I go hiking there. And the essay is kind of a lyrical poem about abandonment and rewilding and power and the ways we abandon ourselves, the ways we abandon the earth. And when I was out hiking there, I had my deck and I pulled the Two of Swords. And I was like, okay. So that to me, I was like, I have to figure out how to incorporate the energy of the Two of Swords into
Hmm.
this essay. And it may not be it may not be like I'm writing literally about the Two of Swords, but I'll consider the figure as a guide, almost like a spiritual guide for that writing process. And so when I sit down to write the essay, I'll pull out the Two of Swords, I'll like put it up for me to look at while I'm writing and kind of just invite that into the space. So that's kind of like just, yeah, some ways that I've incorporated tarot work. There's a really fantastic book called Tarot for Creativity by Chelsea Pippin Mizzy. Um, and I have this book by my desk, and there's lots of like guidance and spreads and very specific ways to incorporate tarot into like an artistic practice. And so I've used that a lot too as reference.
Nice.
Yeah.
Lovely. We
It's
love a
like
book
literally like I can
reference.
reach for it. Like that was
Yeah.
not planned. It was just like it's just by my desk.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always helpful. I feel like as I feel like any artist will resonate with this idea of like, oh, this stopped flowing for me. And I feel like tarot is such a good pathway to kind of like shifting energy, right?
Yeah. And I think working with different decks too, right?
Hmm.
Like sometimes if I've been working with the same deck for a long time, I'll notice that in my work and I'll be like, all right, maybe I need to like shake it up and finding decks that are surprising to me or take
Mm,
me out of the typical imagery maybe used, decks that are more abstract or that just like introduce different concepts, I think, or that may be more like challenging. I just find that to be really interesting. Like sometimes that can be hard to do, but I think that's where growth edges happen is when you there's a little bit of tension that you kind of like bring in and intentionally bring in, and it's almost like I love it because it feels like I'm in collaboration with that artist and with that
hmm.
spiritual practitioner, right? Like using if I'm using your deck, Casey, to write a poem, it's almost like we are in dialogue in this sort of like time bending way.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah, it's such working with the tarot is just a collaborative project, I think. Like I really think about its evolution over time and how the archetypes have shifted and haven't shifted and the structure. There's something very just participatory about that, you
Yeah,
know?
I've always been more drawn, like, and when it comes to spiritual practices, like tarot and the language of symbols and visual has been
Mhm.
so much easier for me to approach than astrology or like any other magical practice. Like, I
Mhm.
truly consider myself to be more of like a tarot girly
Love
than
it.
anything else. And I like, I dabble because I think I like astrological references, for example, are really interesting inputs into tarot too. Like there's a lot of associations. And I find a lot of interest in astrology, but like for my own practice, I think tarot and even oracle decks too. I like in the beginning, I was like all tarot all the time. I really enjoyed learning the language of the 78 cards. But I started recently playing around with Oracle decks, especially by like I'll find an artist like on Instagram and I'll see that they have an Oracle deck. And sometimes the decks are just so creative and like so
Mhm.
interesting. And that has been like pulling one tarot card and one Oracle card or just using the Oracle cards. Um, yeah, that's been kind of a new thing for me.
The combination is so fun.
Hmm.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love seeing how they talk to each other, the tarot and oracle. It's great. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we should talk a little bit about our recent collaboration that we've been doing since we were talking about
Yeah.
creativity.
Speaking of collaborative art making,
Yeah. Because Hannah and I started to host free tarot meetups, tarot-ish,
yeah.
tarot
Hangs.
adjacent.
Tarot hangs.
Yeah, it's called Art and Arcana, and we're meeting in Oakland at the moment. And it's been really fun to just create a space to bring people together and to play with tarot adjacent things.
Yeah, and it's been great because people have shown up who have no background in tarot, like
Mhm.
they've never
Yeah.
really used tarot, but they are open and they have a spiritual practice. And then there's folks who like are much more experienced or consider themselves tarot readers
Hmm.
for profession or for trade. And so mixing that energy is really nice because people are learning from each other, which I think is really beautiful and like getting different perspectives. And then yeah, I've really loved the fact that we've kept things really organic and loose and like it's been kind of like felt like friends meeting up and hanging out and like sometimes we'll just do a tarot circle and like we did a deck exchange, like a deck and spiritual resources and book exchange. And then we recently had someone lead us through like a writing practice using like fairy tale and like plant magic as part of it. And then we've done a art collaging session where we used like, we invited people like if you want to pull a card and then collage around that, or like maybe you just want to do some collaging. but then we're talking about, you know, all these all these themes, like we're talking about the archetypes, we're talking about what's happening in the world and politics and how we're building resilience around it. And we're talking about astrology and people, someone like you, like you're like, okay, like I can speak to this as an expert. And then there's folks who are like have no background who are just asking questions. And I think it's so cool to bring people together in person. That has been very
Hmm.
cup filling for me as like someone who has a lot of friends on the internet and
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of
not a
friends
lot
all
of
over the world too.
yeah,
I feel like the witchy Instagram community has evolved a lot over time, and it's been extremely generative of like so many amazing connections. But we're not all in the same place
I know.
either. So it's nice to be able to be together and be in person.
Yeah. I would
Yeah.
like, I dream of doing like a big in-person Rebis event, like bringing all the contributors together. And like, I had this idea to maybe do a magazine where we bring all the contributors together and we like build the magazine over the course of like 5 days,
Wow. Yeah,
like rent an Airbnb property and like bring in like 15 contributors and just be like, okay, all the art, all the writing is going to be generated during this stay together. And then by the end of it, we're going to have like a magazine that we then publish. Um,
sounds great.
I will work on
Little
trying to make
retreat.
that happen. Yeah,
Yeah,
but, like those are the kinds of things that feel really exciting to me because they are so different from our current day to day. It's so different than opening up an app and DMing with somebody, creating art together and feeling each other's energy in person. Like that's why I think the beauty of the Modern Witches conference that happened, and like we're doing this event in Oakland in October with a local vintage store called the Sunshine Prophecy. We're going to do a little like Bay Area magical marketplace. Like I do think it's important. It takes effort and it's like getting people on people's calendars and schedules and having, you know, asking people to show up. But I
totally.
think it is so important to make that effort because I think right now this administration wants us to all be divided and like doesn't want us to come together and wants us to stay home and wants us, the headlines are all like manufactured fear every single
Hmm.
day. And I think like being able to feel that freeness and that connection just really helps to combat the existential crisis that I'm feeling.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think, especially around themes of like magic and spirituality, I do think there's an element in the work that we do as witches that is all about empowering each other and ourselves to like remember that we have agency to
Hmm.
change things and to like be powerful in the world. So, um, yeah, now more than ever, for sure, very important to
Yeah,
be with the
I think,
witches.
and like Bay Area, it's been interesting because Bay Area has so many creatives, but then
Hmm.
we went through this like whole cycle of tech and like I don't know,
Yeah.
it just really felt like the creative, literary, witchy scene was dispersing and crumbling, and people are priced out of living here, and it's just like there was a really suffocating feeling happening that still is kind of like there.
Hmm.
And I look at places like LA, there was just a big tarot conference in LA, and there's like event spaces dedicated to spiritual, like, you know, like weekly spiritual workshops. And
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, I really would love to see the Bay Area reemerge as a space for creative um witchy spiritual connection and a place
totally.
where people can maybe like, I don't know, get out of the stuffiness that, you know, corporate tech has imposed upon our area.
Exactly. Yes. Especially, it'll be so fascinating to see how AI plays, like what AI
Oh,
does to all of us. Um, but it does seem like the more in-person connection, the more like people who are resourced and fed by creativity, like actually
yeah,
like invest in that in their lives outside of
yeah,
capitalism, just like for the love of it, I think
yeah,
is so important. Yeah.
yeah. Talk about the devil. AI is
Yeah.
what keeps us chained, right? Like I think that is
Yeah.
that is a great modern reference to the devil. It feels like that way.
Hmm.
more than
absolutely.
ever. And I had a lot of curiosity about AI and definitely like played with it and used it and was like, what is this thing? You know, it was like
Mm-hmm.
very, especially when Midjourney first came out. I don't know if you ever used
Mm-mm.
Midjourney, but it was
I
like you like
didn't.
write in prompts and then it like created art. And I was like, what is this? Like, it was like very alarming and like I couldn't stop playing around with it. And that to me felt is like that feels like the devil energy where you're like, when you start to realize like now that you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And now that you've been given this tool, like there's no other thing to use, or there's like, you know, you feel
Mm.
trapped into using it.
Yeah, totally.
And it definitely, I mean, it is definitely a tempting technology for so many people. I really try to, um, I don't know, I was curious about AI for the star issue. It felt like maybe we could invite in um, really creative uses of AI that were not based on AI platforms and plagiarism and like copyright. Like I was like, I was researching this one artist who developed her own she developed an AI. She was like an engineer and
An
developed
algorithm.
an AI algorithm trained on her own writing and art that she input in, and then
Whoa.
she used what she created to like be in connection with all her past, like all her archives and like to
Wow,
make
that's
and
cool.
I was like, that's cool, but like that's not using ChatGPT to write a poem for you, you
Yeah,
know, or like
exactly.
using an AI app to like make an image and then not alter it. You know, so it's just I got a little bit of like people, there was a little bit of criticism for me even saying like we're interested in potentially seeing art from people who might think they're using AI in like interesting generative ways. No one actually submitted anything, and we didn't, nothing in the magazine was AI generated, but um, it really made me think like, wow, like the backlash is interesting. It's like, I think that that's important to consider of like people don't want to see AI art. They don't want to see like even the
Hmm.
creative uses of it because it feels like a slippery slope in terms of like morality and ethics.
Oh,
And
for sure.
I understand that entirely.
There's a lot to unpack, 1,000%. And it's going
Oh
to
yeah.
change so much of our landscape. But yeah, I do think just in terms of like the devil framework, I was like, it took me so long to even use it. I was like, I actually don't think I can open this portal. What is this portal I'm opening? Um,
Scary portal. You don't have to use it. We don't have to
yeah,
use
yeah. Um, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I feel like that would be just like such an interesting topic to see. If there are any witches out there using AI, comment, let us know. How are you using it? Does it feel good? Does it feel devilish? It can feel both.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, there's so much to explore in the coming, I don't know, years with the devil, I think, as we write out this administration. And so I'm really looking forward to reading this issue. It sounds like you have so many contributors. How many?
Yeah, there are
Wow.
38 contributors, which is our
Wow. It's
highest number
amazing.
yet. It's 120 pages, so it is
Wow.
substantial.
Cool.
It's very juicy. There's essay, personal memoir, creative nonfiction, like lyrical essay. There's erotic fiction, which is very hot, very not safe for work. Poetry. There's a really beautiful devil-inspired ritual guide that will have like you can like scan a QR code and you can either like read it or you could like do the guided audio. It's like a
Oh,
journaling
fun.
exercise. Yeah, I really that is very delicious to do, and it's like a way of engaging with the shadow, kind of like a practical application. And there's just so much beautiful art. So I'm really grateful. Yeah, I'm grateful to Meg Jones Wall for their guidance on it as the guest editor. And Javiera Lopez is our creative director, and she did the cover and a lot of
It's
the interior
gorgeous.
artwork. And then Nick Jacobs, who's Bay Area based tarot reader, he does the like layout and the production of it with me. So we're really, I'm just so grateful for the team. Yeah.
Amazing. Yes, we're going to have the link to pre-order your copies in the show notes.
Mm.
Um, and I'd love it if, I like to finish these conversations with kind of an open-ended prompt, but what is bringing you hope or inspiration these days?
I think conversations like this for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think just continuing to be in connection with people, like the reminder that there is still so much to love about humanity and about the earth, and connecting with friends, connecting with partners, being in collaboration, making art, finding magic in the mundane, right? Like being able to um, break from our programming and um, find little snippets of magic, whether it's like a tomato growing in my garden or like a caterpillar or something. It's really like getting into that inner child stuff. And I think I'm a parent. I know you're a parent to a young
Hmm.
one too. And I do think parenting is a way of anchoring hope. It is how to teach a child about the world without breaking their heart too much. And in the
Hmm.
meantime, I think that's a lot of repair because I think before I had a kid, it was really easy for me to just be cynical all of the time.
Yeah,
Like I didn't have
totally.
to teach anyone that the world was worth living in. I could kind of sink into a state of despair more easily. And having my daughter, who is absolutely a witch, and
Mhm.
raising her to be in connection to the earth and connection to herself, and to hold like loss and grief and and violence, and introducing her to concepts of violence and how people hurt each other while trying to forge a path for her to exist in the world and to like show up in a bright light way.
Right.
It gives me hope because I think we're doing it. I see parents do it all the time. So it gives me purpose, at least on the hardest days. I'm like, okay, well, at least I can do this one thing for this one at least I can meet someone's needs and like show up for them, and take them out in nature and show them that the earth is this like really beautiful place in this little corner of the world.
Yes. Yeah, that resonates deeply for sure. Um, and it is thoroughly helpful. I think we talk a lot about, enchantment and like getting back to a place of enchantment in a hellscape, if I might be so bold to say. It's just the lens of a child, or like if you, not even if you're a parent, but just like if you can just be in a state of like wonder at the world and like
Yeah,
how the air smells today, it's a great place to start, you know? Important.
agree completely. I just spent like a weekend in Sequoia National Park with my daughter,
Mm,
and there was just this moment where she was like, Mama, look at the cloud. And the way she said it in her voice was just like so awe-filled. It was
hmm.
just so, and she was like, look at the cloud. And she's like, okay, I want to eat pizza. She
Yeah.
like moved on really quickly. But like that didn't make the awe or the wonder any less, right?
Yeah.
It just like she allowed herself to fill up like a balloon with that energy. And then she carried it with her. And I was just like, oh, I have a lot to learn from that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Lovely. Well, outside of the Rebus, is there anything else you want our audience to know? How can they support you?
Yeah, I mean, I think supporting the Rebis is wonderful. I have my own Substack with writing that I
Yes.
very infrequently publish. It's free, but if you're interested in following along, I do a lot of poetry, lyrical essay. I've been writing a lot about grief because my dad died last year, and it's been showing up for me a lot. So it's hannaeve.substack.com. You can put it in the show notes.
Absolutely.
And I would just love to connect with folks. So like I don't if like email me or reach out on social media. I love having pen pals and new connections. It's how like I met you, Casey, was just
Yeah.
like reaching out and like being like, hey, like I want to connect with you. Um, and I am not a tarot reader by profession, but I will give a reading if you show me that you're making a donation to like a nonprofit group. So if that's of interest to anybody, like that would be fun to do. I haven't done that in a while. So yeah, I think
Sweet.
that's it.
We love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank
And
you.
to our listeners, thanks for being here. If you have any questions for Hannah, please reach out to them and leave us a comment if you fancy. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Casey.
Yeah, take care. Thank you for tuning in to the Modern Witches podcast. We hope you've been inspired to cultivate your own magic and to craft your own spiritual practices. Let us know what sparked your curiosity by leaving us a comment on this episode or leave us a review. And don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode. Your feedback and engagement truly fills our cups. If you're looking for more ways to gather with your fellow witches, please support our work on Patreon. Learn more at modernwitches.org. Blessed be.